Okay, this is Sometimes Record, episode number 26, being recorded on May 22, 2020. I'm John the Bond, coming to you from beautiful Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And we've got with us our special guest, finally, Lawrence Wright, coming to us from somewhere in Britain. And I thought we'd do things a bit differently today. Normally, what I do is, before a call, I speak with the guest and I say, right, what topics do you want to talk about? What's going to be the thrust of the conversation? But I thought it might be fun if we do this on the record, so people get insight into what the pre-call sounds like on the actual call. How's that sound, Lawrence? Sound good?
Yeah, fire away, John, yeah.
So what I normally do is I say, right, we'll talk about you, obviously. We'll do the introduction. And then what are some of the main topics that you want to talk about? So you mentioned a couple to me just before I got the recording bot in the room. You mentioned the Concorde thing. This will be good. You mean the Concorde is in the plane that used to fly from England to America in a few hours. You've got some theories about that, do you?
Yeah, I did a presentation about it. I don't know whether you caught it on my energy hoax. I covered. There was two Concordes actually. There was the British and the French Concorde, which, it was the French one that crashed in Paris, and in 20 or 30 years earlier, it was the Russian one, Concordsky, which allegedly crashed in Paris. But both of them were hoaxes. And that was in my video, but that's not actually on YouTube anymore. But when you look at it, it's so obvious that both crashes were hoaxes for whatever reason. I don't know what the reason was, but when I was a young boy.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll pause you there. That sounds like a fantastic topic. Let's do the Concorde hoax, as you call it. That'd be great. What are some of the other topics that you like to discuss or that you want to cover in this call? Give us an overview of some of the topics, and I'll just write them down and we'll try and fly through them once we get into the call proper.
Okay, well, we can talk about the energy hoax. We can talk about oil being dug out of the ground, pumped out of the ground, being a hoax. Energy being generated by power stations being a hoax. The petrol that you put in your car, it's not made. It's a finished product that's made mostly in the Middle East and shipped over as a finished product. There's no oil wells over there. It's all manufactured, hydrogen and carbon, hydrocarbon. There's an abundance of that on this earth, and they just make it in these big processing plants. And
Lawrence, you are speaking my language, because I happen to have the same opinion as you, that this oil does not come from the ground and then get refined and then sent on big tankers to countries. To me, that's ridiculous. So I've got the energy hoax and the oil hoax written down here. What else? This is good. This is like a good... Here's the problem. Oftentimes I talk to people and we'll be talking for half an hour before we get to the hook, where we say to people, hey, by the way, if you listen to this whole podcast, here's what you're going to hear. By doing this pre-call on the record, this is great. The listeners get an idea of where this is going. So we've got Concorde hoax, energy hoax. What else?
Well, the big subject have been, you might not want to talk about this, but the big subject I've talked about recently is the nature of reality, because it's wholly different to what most people think. I did a presentation in New Horizons, which is near Blackpool in the UK, and I uploaded it to YouTube, and it's the only video I've got. It's had 2,000 views. It's been well received from those who've actually watched it. Basically, all the clues as to the nature of this reality, that's what the movies are for, to tell you this is what's really happening. The nature of reality, why are we here? Where do we go when we die? How did we get here? Who's controlling all this stuff? And obviously the NPC thing is huge, because that's why we've got the huge problems at the moment, that you're never going to wake these people up, because they get downloads. They just get the download of the official Matrix reality, and doesn't matter how absurd it gets, they're just going to go along with it. It's a big problem. But most people, I've got my Facebook page, I've got on my Facebook, and you get people, the circle of friends. I've got about 700 friends on Facebook, and they're all posting all this doom and gloom about coronavirus, but they're preaching to the converted. Everybody knows about it. They need to be looking at other ways of, because I think all of this is the enemy is not the politicians and the world leaders and their scientists. They're not the problem, because they're all controlled by artificial intelligence. There's something above them which is directing all this. And I think the artificial intelligence itself is out of control. I sent you a NASA, you won't have a chance to look at it yet, but I sent you a NASA document, and he was documenting on there that it was saying that the AI is going to get so artificial, so so exponentially bigger than humans that it could go out of control, and it has. That's why it's getting absurd. I mean, when you look at it, the New World Order. It was always a lot of little small steps over, long periods of time, centuries. Little bits here and there, and they've done so much in the past 3 months. They've done like 200 years worth in 3 months. It smacks of desperation. There must be something else going on for them to have to try and do so much so soon. So it's.
Well, let me say, and I meant to cut you off again, but this is going to be a terrific conversation. So we've got the Concorde hoax, the energy hoax, and the nature of reality. I'm sure that'll take the full 2 hours. So I'll just leave it there for now. We will come back, though, if we get time. I want to talk a little bit about your Pac-Man model and your experience with Flat Earth. And I know a lot of people are exhausted with Flat Earth. I totally get it. Here's the thing, though. You were there in 2015 when this got big, and you weren't one of the, those people who popped up and started their own little network. And I've got no problem with networks, by the way. Networking is good, but all of a sudden, Lawrence, in 2015, 2016, all these people came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're kind of running this little online e-community of Flat Earth. But you weren't one of them. You were doing your own thing, and I like independence. Yeah. So we'll talk about Pac-Man and Flat Earth and your experiences with that.
Yeah, sure.
And also, if we get time, it'd be cool to talk about this coronavirus and just get your perspective. I know that people are exhausted with coronavirus as well, but I want to get your opinion on coronavirus. So I've got a whole bunch of topics written down here. This should be fun. But let's get right into the start of the call. This is what we would normally do, beginning the call. We'd start with, well, Lawrence, tell us about yourself. So hopefully listeners have appreciated the last 5 minutes of how we set these shows up. Just give me a few minutes for my voice to warm up. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, and you are the first person I've spoken to. So my voice box doesn't get much exercise these days. Usually the first 10 to 15 minutes. It takes me a while for my voice to come good, but it'll do that. Thank you for bearing with us, listeners. So let's talk to Lawrence, right? You're coming to us from whereabouts in the UK?
I'm I'm near Liverpool, not far from Liverpool, not far from Blackpool, a place called Southport, which is on the coast.
And is that where you grew up? You grew up in that part of the world?
No, I grew up in a place in Cheshire, which is in the middle of the country. But I've lived in various locations in the UK, and it's wherever life takes you, you end up where you end up. But if you're looking at how I got into the alternative community, it all started 20 years ago when I was a broker at the time. I used to arrange mortgages and finance and pensions and investments, and invariably you go and see people in the evening when they go home from work. And I came home one night and there was a program on Sky TV that was having a bit of a mocking look at the moon landings being faked. So I went on to the internet, which was in its early days. It was all dial-up then, and I saw something for a VHS video. That's how long it's ago. I bought this VHS video called "What Really Happened on the Moon," and I bought that, and that was a real. If you watch that, you'd see, it's all been staged in studios.
Do you know who was behind that video? What really happened on the moon? Do you remember who was producing it or who was the narrator or anything like that?
I do, but I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Because there was this book called We Never Went to the Moon or something like this by a guy called Bill Casing, I think. Does that name ring a bell for you?
No, but it featured in it was a in-length, 2-hour documentary, and it was covering every aspect of how the moon landing was faked. So, but anyway, so that was the moon landing. And of course, then I decided I'm going to tell everybody about this. And of course, everybody back then, about the year 2000, everybody thought I was nuts. Shortly afterwards, I thought, they would lie to us about something, so monumental as the moon landings. What else would they lie about? So I went to my laptop and typed in the words in the search engine, 911 conspiracy. And of course, all this stuff came spewing up, and wow, that was it. I was hooked onto 9/11 for probably about 5 or 6 years, looking into every aspect of that. Probably about 2002, 2003, I got into 9/11. And of course, I was immediately in the no planes camp because that was obvious. And then all these theories came out, like Judy Wood and the space beams. I wasn't really buying into that. I thought she was some kind of agent. And then the one that really hit home was Simon Shack, who got, I forget what his channel was called, but he was posting all sorts of very interesting stuff. And, I came to the conclusion after watching all this stuff that the whole thing was effectively a movie. Nobody died. You look at some of the scenes in 9/11, like the people covered in all the dust, the iconic guy who's carrying his briefcase and he's covered from head to toe in dust. Well, most of those pictures have been taken off there now. You can't find them. But yeah, it was so obvious because they were actors. It was one guy and he played about 4 different parts, in disguise. It was obvious that they'd got so many actors on the street taking part in it. When we saw the towers came down, that can have just been, a movie just channeled into the screens. I don't think we actually saw what really happened.
Well, you've covered a lot there, and I'm all about context, Lawrence. I love to give listeners context because the thing is, a lot of people find their way to my website and they might not know some of the stuff that you and me know like the back of our hands. So you did mention this Simon Shack video. Of course, he made September Clues, and his first September Clues was basically trying to show that the footage that we were shown of the planes, that footage wasn't real. So do you remember roughly when you realised, hold on, the planes aren't real, the deaths aren't real? Do you remember roughly what year that was when this all became apparent to you?
Well, I was in the no planes camp as soon as it came out. I don't know. It was probably about 2004, 2005 that really hit the thing. And of course there was 2 camps. There was a huge website that was called 911truth.org. I forget what it was called. And there was always 2 camps. Those that were going for, the planes really did hit and they were, filled with bombs or whatever. And those that were the no planes. And of course, there was the ones who were going for the theory that it wasn't no planes. They were the agents. And of course, we spent hours wasting our time arguing the toss with them. And that went on for a long period of time. But the September Clues, that was the definitive where a lot of the real truth came out, like the victims, some of the detailed analysis of what actually went on. The victim was very interesting because, all these people allegedly died, but nobody claimed any compensation. I was there taking the view that those Twin Towers were actually empty apart from, maybe the windows on the World Restaurant. The rest of it was just an empty shell. And these companies that allegedly operated from there didn't. They were, obviously working somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that restaurant at the top of the Twin Towers, the Windows to the World or Windows of the World or something like this. Because, I don't know what happened on 9/11. I don't think any of us do. But if I had to speculate or guess, my guess would be that building was empty, except for that restaurant. Because I've read too many reports from people who don't seem to be telling lies that they did eat food there. So it seems to me, if you've got a 110-story building, there's no problem with having a restaurant at the top of that building where people can go and eat. It's not hard to run a restaurant at the top of that. But the rest of the building can still be empty. And by having that Windows of the World, it just adds legitimacy to the operation. Then when the buildings come down, if someone says, but maybe the rest of the floors were empty, the people who are like, oh, no, I ate there, to them they can't imagine the rest of the building was empty. But of course, if they're just catching the elevators to go from the bottom to the restaurant and back down again, they don't know what the hell's going on in the rest of the building, do they?
No. I mean, these groups like architects and engineers, I think they were bogus. I mean, one of the guy who was the janitor, who was the big hero, I forget what his name was, the janitor who apparently rescued lots of people, he actually came over to the UK and he stopped with a friend of mine when he came over and he was doing a tour of, the truth communities. And I said to my friend, I said, look, this guy was out there breathing in all this toxic dust. He must have had severe breathing problems when he came over. No, not a problem at all. So,
was it Richard Gage, the guy you're talking about? Richard Gage, I think
was... He's the architects and engineers guy. No, it was some Latin American guy. I forget, Antonio or somebody. I forget his name. But he came over to the UK. He was the janitor. So if you type in janitor for the 911, you'd find out who he was. But I wasn't buying into his story at all. Obviously.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, this Richard Gage guy, for the listeners, because most of them will be at least vaguely familiar with this, but yeah, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, this is from Wikipedia, by the way, is an American non-profit organisation promoting the conspiracy theory that the World Trade Center was destroyed in a controlled demolition, disputing the accepted conclusions around the September 11 attacks, including the 9/11 Commission report. as well as FEMA's study 2002, and instead advocates for the WTC controlled demolition conspiracy theories. And they're a non-profit organisation. They were founded by Richard Gage, and supposedly they have 3,000 members who are architects and engineers. And when I first got into looking at 9/11, sure enough, I saw architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and it seems so convincing, doesn't it? It's like, oh, they've got thousands of engineers and architects. You know, these are the guys we should support because they've got their own authority. You know, we should put a lot of our energies into this group. We can trust these guys because they're the experts who are saying it's not real.
Yeah, I know, and it's like, well, you look at 9/11 and there's virtually zero evidence of any aeroplanes. Similar to the Concorde crashes, there's no evidence of any wreckage for either of the crashes apart from some planted bits. You know, I'm going off 9/11 now, John. That's because we're probably going to run out of time. But when I was a young boy, I was 8 years old, and I was sat in the kitchen where I live in Stockport, near Manchester. And we heard this noise. I was sat in the kitchen, and my dad, who was a fireman, and he'd just got home from the night shift. And we opened the back kitchen door, and we saw this plane coming down. And it actually came down and crashed about 600 yards away from where we lived. So we were right on the scene. And my dad immediately ran out of the house and legged it down to the crash site. And he was down there before the actual fire brigade got there, and he was getting some of the survivors out. Most of them died. I think they got about 12 survivors out. And then I was 8 years old, so I ran out. I could see the plumes of smoke coming up, and I got there myself. And obviously there was evidence that it was an aeroplane, because you could see the tail and some of the fuselage and bits and pieces everywhere. But you look at the crash scene of Concorde and the Konkordsky, Tupolev, the Russian plane. There's no evidence of that any plane crashed. You can go and watch the Tupolev crash on YouTube, and you just get this little tiny puff of smoke when it hits the ground. And the wreckage is sort of spread over huge swathes of areas, but there's nothing that resembles an aeroplane. And the Concorde one, it's just a patch of scorched earth. And there's one film of Concorde taken from some guy who was driving a van. And, you know, what's the chances of two Concordes both crashing in Paris? It's, I don't believe in coincidences like that. It's,
Well, I promise you we'll come back and talk about the old Tupolev and the Concorde later in the call. Just getting back to 9/11, I love playing word association with people. If I say the words to you, Harley guy, what comes to mind?
Is that the guy who came out and said, wow, they hit the building, and before you know it, the jet fuel exploded and it brought the building down? Is that you mean the guy who got the two stooges behind him? The two.
Yeah, that's pretty much the one. This is from the day of the event. It's from like a Fox News clip. And the reporter says, we want to speak with, I think his name is Mark Walsh. You were, you witnessed the crash. And then this guy, this is on the day of the event, he's like, I saw this plane come out of nowhere and ream into the side of the Twin Towers, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then a second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
We want to bring in Mark Walsh, who's a freelancer for Fox. You live just a few blocks away and witnessed.
Dude, I live on the 43rd floor of a building which is 5 blocks from the World Trade Center itself. I witnessed the entire thing from beginning to end.
People talk about how it looked like a movie. I know when I came walking down here early this morning and saw both towers on fire and people on every street corner, it was like a movie. But you watched the planes hit the towers.
I was watching with my roommate. It was approximately several minutes after the first plane had hit. I saw this plane come out of nowhere and just ream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
This is on the day of the event, by the way, and he's wearing this big Harley. Has he got Harley on the shirt or on the hat? I can't remember, but he's got a prominent Harley logo on him somewhere, and that's how he got the informal nickname Harley guy. And of course the question is, Lawrence, how the hell did this guy know that the buildings fell due to structural failure on the day of the event?
I think he got a download, John,
And then, he's got some weird dude hanging behind him, just doing what? Listening into this conversation with the Fox News crew. And then in the longer clip, which I'm not sure if it's still on YouTube, it probably is somewhere, in the longer clip, the Fox News reporter then says, and who are you, sir?
So can we talk to you? Sir? What's your role out here right now?
I'm just standing by right now. Can't say what role I'm playing right now.
Well, there's a lot of standing by. There's also concern that some of these other buildings might actually come down.
The whole thing almost seems as though it was crafted to be shifty. Do you know what I mean? Almost like it was put there as an Easter egg.
Yeah, I mean, they make it so obvious that, it's like in all the TV studios, they've got all these experts in already saying it was Osama bin Laden. They were in there already. It's, not all these people that were alleged. I mean, David Weiss said he saw a plane crash into it, and he got a hard time on fakeologies off that. What was the guy, Unreal, was questioning him about it, and he gave David Weiss a real hard time.
Oh, we're getting into some real inside baseball here, yes. So for the listeners, David Weiss is a prominent Flat Earth promoter, but he was involved in the YouTube conspiracy scene even prior to Flat Earth. And then a few years ago, maybe 2015, 2016, he was involved in an interview on Fakeologist with, I think, Kay Hamad, used to have a show on Fakeologist. And then, Hoi Polloi, who used to work with Simon Shack, he called into the show. And then he started asking David about these questions. And for more context, David was on the Baller Skeptic Roundtable, which I hosted back in 2015 for 12 episodes. And that was one of the, whether we like it or not, that was one of the key shows that helped Flat Earth to quickly get very big in the so-called truth scene back in 2015. So there's a lot of inside baseball here. But the long story short is, David Weiss claims to have known someone who died in that event. And then he offered as evidence for this a photo of his friend who had died in 9/11, because he also claims to have witnessed the event too, because he lives not far from, that part of the US, there's New York, but then there's lots of people who live around New York, not in New York, if you know what I'm trying to say. Like New York borders Connecticut, I think. And so David's story is he lives not far, and he actually witnessed from a distance some of the event. And so he gives this photo of someone who he claims died in the event, and it's clearly a fake photo. Clearly. Anyone who knows anything about media fakery is like, David, that's a fake photo. And that David Weiss guy, he has quite a sense of humour. To this day, I do wonder, was he just trolling the Fakeologist people and the Clues Forum people? I do wonder about that.
Yeah, and there's other people who say they've witnessed it, so I don't know why they would actually say that,
And David's story is the classic, it was a beautiful, I've never seen such a clear day in my whole life. The skies were picture blue. And then I saw so it's the same story that here. But look, I don't know the exact story with David and what's up with him. I haven't spoken to him in years, but all criticism aside, he was cool to work with back in the Flat Earth days. So
it is, but it was such an iconic event, John, because I was driving in my car in the morning, going to work. No, actually, it was going to the gym. Came on the radio about some plane crashing in, just a low-key type thing on there. Anyway, by the time I got to the gym and I was sat on the exercise bike, we got this huge TV screen, and we're all, a whole row of us sat on this, in our row of bikes, watching this TV screen, watching this next plane crashing into the second tower. It was quite an iconic day, and those days sort of stick with you. It's like the so-called JFK event that never happened. Everybody remembers where they were and what they were doing on that day, and it's obviously one of those big events to actually change the course of humanity.
And did you believe it when you first saw 9/11? Because I did. I was 14 years old at the time, and I believed it for a long, long time. I didn't even question any of it.
Well, I didn't particularly like the Americans at that time. I thought it was quite cool, and I was getting quite excited about it. And then I heard, there's another one. This plane's doing this, and this plane's doing that. All these other planes that were flying that had allegedly been hijacked. I didn't want anybody to get hurt, obviously. It was probably a really exciting story at the time. And everything stopped. Everybody stopped what they were doing that day just to watch it. And then you get home at night, and that's the entire news for that day and for days afterwards. It
was a huge event. Up until recently, it was the biggest event in recorded human history, some would argue. But it does seem like it's been eclipsed recently by this coronavirus nonsense, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. So just drawing a line under this 9/11 thing. So right now, your position is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like your position is the planes were fake, nobody died. It was basically a movie, is what you said.
Yeah, there may have been some people who got caught up in it, that small people may have died. I don't know, but
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. I'm open to it. I mean, there's a member of this website, Dante from New York, God love him, who believes, well, he's from New York, and he says he knows people who did disappear after the event. So the point he makes is that people did disappear. It doesn't necessarily mean that they died in 9/11 as claimed, but what he's saying is that real life people did exist who he knew, and then they disappeared after 9/11. The story that was told by family members and friends was, they were in the towers or whatever. So even if they weren't killed in the event, they did disappear, which I'm open to. I mean, I've got no reason to doubt Dante's testimony. So people might have disappeared, but it doesn't mean they disappeared from a plane hitting a building or from a real office, 2 real 110-story towers collapsing with people in them. They don't necessarily follow from one from the other. So that's 9/11. So you found out about 9/11 way before me. I didn't really find out about the nobody died thing until probably 2014-15. So you were miles ahead of me. So from the moon landing nonsense into 9/11, and then what came next? What was the next big thing you stumbled on?
Well, because I was on, the 9/11 truth sites, they had other topics. So you go and look on the other topics, and I was interested in health, so that led me to what I do now, which is researching alternative health remedies. I've been doing that as a job, well, as a vocation, so to speak, for a good 10 years. Queensland, Australia was one of my biggest customers until I got taken down by eBay. I was making skin cancer remedies, and Queensland, the capital of skin cancer of the world, that was my biggest customer. I sent probably thousands of jars of the remedy to there, then Australia took me down, the United States took me down, Germany took me down, and the UK took me down. So now I don't do it anymore because it's been banned because it works.
When did the eBay start taking your products down?
Oh, probably about 4 years ago, up until then. But I was getting orders every day, and it was nearly from Australia. Queensland was the big one. And of course, if the customs had actually got the packages in the post, they would confiscate them. So sometimes you had to send it out twice. Yeah, it was really, really big. The number of people that were using it, it was really big.
Let me make a couple of points for listeners. Firstly, we are getting some distortion in what you're saying. It's not too much that we can't persevere with the call, but let me just apologise to listeners if it's a bit distracting. We're doing our best here, and we actually tried to do this call a couple of weeks ago, and the call quality was even worse. So why this is happening, I'm not too sure, but I think we can push through it. It's not a big deal. And then the second thing to say is that I lived in Brisbane for 7 or 8 years, which is the capital of Queensland. So it's interesting that you say that. So eBay took you down, you were selling these cancer remedies. Can I ask you, this is a bit tangential, but it's related. Black Self. What's your opinion on Black Self?
Yeah, it works. It works on humans, horses, cats, and dogs. And I've got testimonies from people, photographs of the lot. It works skin cancer works every time, and it doesn't cause. If you put it on healthy tissue, it doesn't cause any damage apart from a bit of minor irritation. But it doesn't just treat cancers; it takes out abscesses. Some people use it for acne. Any impurities in the skin. It's a drawing salve as well, so it'll draw the impurities out. I've had cancer all over my body, on my head, on my back, on my chest, on my face, and a few weeks and it's all gone, healed up, no scars. It works.
Let me share with you a quick story. When I first started podcasting, all I knew about was the baby hoaxes, like Sandy Hook in Boston. I didn't know anywhere near as much as I know now. It is a journey, and I'm still learning, but back in 2014, I was very new to this. And I was doing the podcast with a guy called Lindsay the Silver Fox. And he's a great guy. He came with me on the Dino Skeptic road trip, and I still speak to him regularly. He's an awesome dude. Anyway, when I first met him and we first started podcasting, he came to my apartment one day because we were recording we were streaming actually from my apartment. Lindsay, myself, and Ethan. We'd all be together in the room doing that. And so he came to my apartment one day with this little bottle of Black Self, which I knew nothing about. And he starts telling me that it remedies this problem, remedies that problem. And at the time, I was still a believer in the medical industry. And I still thought all these alternative medical or these alternative health remedies were quackery. And I was like, who is this dude bringing this bizarre stuff? And it's funny for me to look back and think, I can understand why I was so close-minded, because I was so heavily programmed for 27 years by the TV and by everything, that even when I knew about the baby hoaxes, I still wasn't very open-minded to the levels of deception in our world. So for listeners out there, if you're hearing this idea of alternative cancer treatments or whatever and it sounds crazy to you, I totally get it. That's how I felt, even when I knew about the baby hoaxes. And so I guess my point, Lawrence, is you can learn about one thing and then think that you're open-minded, but actually it does take so much time to deprogram all of the nonsense that has been put into our brains.
It does, John. I mean, while we're talking briefly about alternative health, here's one for you. So, in the 1950s, there's lots of people that went down with polio.
Well, I've heard about that. I'm very skeptical.
Let me tell you what my perception of what that is. After the Second World War, lots of people then started to eat canned food. Yeah, and eating canned food for long periods of time, you're going to start absorbing some of the tin in the tin cans, and when your body gets overloaded with the tin, the body has to detox it, and when you detox it, you get these symptoms. And it's the same with the flu itself. It's just toxicity that's built up in the body, and it's usually seasonal. So people tend to detox themselves. It's not consciously. The body is programmed to do it, and it's metals in the body are a huge cause of toxicity. And like I sent you a link earlier today, which you can have a look at later, about metal fume poisoning. Manganese oxide, is one of the nanoparticles supposedly in chemtrails, which can be activated 5G. And if you go and look up metal fume poisoning, it will give you the exact same symptoms of COVID-19.
Yes, and I did get that email, and you're saying this might be tied into 5G.
Yeah, because if it's activated, activated by 5G, they can selectively target the people they want to take out, the so-called useless eaters, the elderly people, those who are not productive. And if they can do that at will with 5G, then they can have phase 2, phase 3, they can do it whenever they want.
Okay, so here's what I've done. I've written on my little notepad here, 5G next to Corona, so we'll talk about that as well when we get to the Corona part of the conversation. This is exactly what I was hoping this call would be. It's going to go all over the place, but we'll try and keep it in some kind of order. So let's just look at this this chronology then. So you find out about the moon landing hoax through a VHS tape. Those were the days. And that leads you to 9/11 eventually. You Google it. Back then, there was way more of a diversity of content out there. There's more total content now, but it used to be a lot easier to find. Back in the day, not even that long ago, if you watched a Boston bombings video, they would then recommend Sandy Hook conspiracy videos for you. I'm talking 2014, 15. Like YouTube and Google used to actually help you find this information. Now, it's a very different story. So you would have found out about a whole bunch of things, including Simon Shack, Judy Wood, etc. And then you got into alternative health, and then you started making money from sending your products to the world. Do you mind if I ask, what do you do now? How do you get by these days?
I sell essential oils and make perfumes and natural remedies for, everyday complaints that, the medical profession will just give you something to treat symptoms. I'll give you an example. One of my customers from Australia, he used to call me a lot, and, he'd ring me up, we'd have a chat, and he rang me up one day and he said, Lawrence, he says, I've had gout for years, what can you recommend? And the thought just came into my head because I feel that I channel into the ether, wherever this information is, what a remedy is. And the first thought that came into my head was MSM, which is it's organic sulfur. It's from nature. I get it from pine trees. And I said, my initial thoughts, I'd take some MSM. So then I looked it up and found out that, it would work. I thought people had, there's anecdotal evidence. So I says, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go and buy some MSM and start taking it. Anyway, a week later, his gout had gone forever. So it's amazing what you can actually channel just through your thoughts. You think about it and then you go and investigate what your thoughts are to see whether there's any evidence to support it. So
this is MSM, as in M for Microsoft, S for Sam, M for Microsoft, MSM. And that's another example. A listener of this very website, she's been supporting my work right from the start, Mizzy from Victoria. She came and visited myself, Lindsay and Ethan when we were doing that ARP back in the day. And she brought with her some MSM. And I had the same response to her as I had to Lindsay when he brought me the black self. I'm like, well, thank you for bringing this to me, but there's no way I'm trying this because it seemed so crazy to me at the time. Whereas now I'm a lot more open-minded. But we don't really have time to get into the MSM thing because that's a complicated topic. Just going back, though, to essential oils. For those who don't know what essential oils are or how they can benefit them, how would you explain it to people who are new to this idea of essential oils?
Well, I mean, a good way of describing this, they're like the blood of the plant. And the essential oil family has got a cure for most things. Sometimes you need to blend them together in a synergy and they work better. So all kinds of skin complaints. I mean, some people take them internally, but they're brilliant for skin complaints. And I make stuff for anti-aging, so you delay the effects of aging on the skin. And there's some amazing plants out there. And there's probably about 1,000 of them. So it's, I've got about 200 different types. And you blend them together, so you can treat things like varicose veins, hemorrhoids, rosacea, eczema, you name it. Because, see, when people have problems with the skin, they assume it's a problem with the skin, but it's not the skin that has a problem. It's the body trying to shed toxicity, and it's manifesting on the skin. It's the toxicity on the surface of the skin. So if you had, for example, eczema, your doctor will give you a steroid cream. And all that does, it will go away, but it's just driving the poison back into the body. Then it'll come back again later. You'll never cure yourself of it. You need to pull the poison out, which is how medicine works. If you can imagine the world of medicine, let's imagine, for example, that all the car mechanics went on strike one week and the doctors were put in charge of fixing your motor car. And this guy goes to the doctors. He says, "Doctor, the thermometer on my car, it's overheating. It's in the red zone." And the doctor says, "Oh, that's not a problem. I'm going to cut this wire here, the wire to the dial." And the dial goes back to cool. So the symptoms gone, what you've observed in the car, but the problem's still there. And that's what they're doing. They're treating the symptoms of what the problem is and not the underlying cause. And that's for all of health. The medical profession don't cure anything. They haven't got any vested interest to cure anything because they're cutting off their income supply.
And these so-called doctors are trained for years to follow certain rules and procedures. And this idea that, a doctor, he knows so much about health and the human body, I used to completely believe that. Now I understand these guys are just indoctrinated into what is effectively a cult, and they will just do exactly as they've been programmed to do. They're not gurus, they're not prophets, they're not sage men, they're just following what they've been trained to do for years and years and years. They're indoctrinated, period.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck off my doctor's list because I hadn't been for over 10 years. They said, we've removed you from our list because you've not been to see us. They're sending things about having flu vaccine and, you're a certain age now, you need to come and have all these tests. So I just ignored the lot. But people have faith in their doctors because, they have faith in the authority rather than the truth. And that's the big problem. The medical profession doesn't make people well. It just keeps people sick.
Well, that's where the money is. And I don't blame people for having faith in the medical industry. I don't blame the older version of me for having that faith too, because firstly, we're programmed with all these television shows with cute guys like George Clooney in shows like ER and Chicago Hope, and we're programmed to believe that these people are so smart and so wise and can help us. But it's not just that. I think we all, most of us anyway, we want to believe that if we have a problem, someone else can fix it for us. Especially with health. Health is so important to our lives. We want to believe there's some organization, there's some group of people who can fix things for us. We want to believe that. And I can tell you, when I started to realize that that's all complete bullshit, the sense of alienation and isolation, like, oh no, if I've got a problem, I've got to fix it. When you've spent 20, and for some people it's 40, 50, 60 years believing if you've got a problem, someone else will fix it, to realize, no, they're not going to fix it. They might actually make it worse. It's like a sense of, oh no, I don't want to have to be responsible because we've spent so long being irresponsible. We're irresponsible. It's someone else's job to fix it. And I think this is one of the major barriers for people mentally to this idea that the medical industry is a hoax. That's what I call it, a hoax. It's a deception. It's a ruse. They don't want to have to take responsibility for their own health. Lawrence, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's absolutely true, John. Every ailment that I've had, I've researched it myself, treated it successfully. The worst thing I had was testicular cancer, and I got a remedy for that. It took about 3 months. Healed completely, So some things can be quite frightening, You think, but there was no way I was going to go and see the doctors. I'm always going to treat myself, and I did. People ask me. I was out walking the dog last year, and I just got this impulse to start gathering conkers, horse chestnuts, and I was putting them in a plastic bag. I take plastic bags to pick up the dog poo. And I filled one with conkers, and I got back and what we're going to do with this? And I started researching it. Oh, it's a good remedy for hemorrhoids. So I made a remedy for hemorrhoids with conkers and essential oils. And this is how these synchronicities. A few days later, this guy asked me, "Have I got a remedy for hemorrhoids?" And I said, "Well, you won't believe this, but I've just made some."
And what was the feedback from him when he used your remedy?
His hemorrhoid. Well. I saw him 5 days later. They're gone. You can't believe it.
Excellent. So tell us, with these essential oils, what's the idea? People mix them into their food, or they burn them, like a candle burner? Like, what's the? Because I'm not asking just for the listeners, because many of them probably already know all the answers to this. I've actually never used essential oils, so I'm learning here as well. What's the general use? You add them to your food, or you burn them and breathe them? What's the deal?
Well, obviously, the smell of the oil can change your mood. It can elevate your mood. It can change the way you feel. So you can burn them on oil burners. You can put them in diffusers. You can palm them and breathe. Get some frankincense, rub it into your arm, and breathe deeply. Very good for sort of meditation. And you can mix blends together and mix it in, with carrier oils or with into a balm, and you can rub them into your skin. You can add other things to them to actually get them into the body. Like you can use a substance called DMSO, which if you've got muscle problems, then you can rub it into your, say you've got a dodgy knee, you can rub it into your knee and it will alleviate the problem. It's they're multifaceted, but some people take them internally. I'm not particularly an advocate of taking them internally because I've not seen any actual hard evidence that internal use is of any benefit, but it may be. A lot of people buy frankincense oil to take it internally. But,
so typically people are burning them and then it's like an aromatherapy kind of thing?
Most people buy them because they like the smell, and it makes them feel better.
What's your most popular essential oil? Because what I'll do is I'll put a link to your... Is it like an online store? You run your own website?
No, I'm on eBay.
I'll put a link to your eBay store below this call. What's your most popular oil?
It's Palo Santo. It comes from Ecuador, and it's called from the plant's known as the holy wood. And it's quite a spiritual, witchy type of oil. And they actually distill that on a full moon, believe it or not. And if they distill it on a full moon, it gets double the yield of oil. The tree itself, the living tree, doesn't produce any oil. They have to wait till the tree's died and fell to the ground before they can get any oil out of it. But Palo Santo is probably the most rapidly growing popularity oil.
And what are people typically, what's their interest in that one? Like, does it have a particular remedy?
No, people take it for meditation. It's like people burn sage to go and cleanse their house, white sage. And people take, a good combination, if you want a good meditation oil, you take some Palo Santo, some sandalwood, and some frankincense and blend them together. And you would, burn it or palm it, breathe it in, or diffuse it. They use it in yoga centres, when they're trying to detach themselves, connect with one's true self, which is what meditation is. It's, detaching yourself from the 3D world and connecting with your true self.
Excellent. What I'll do is I'll put a link to your eBay below this call on johnthebond.com, and people can go and check that out if they like. I'm not here to say that it's good or bad. I've never used essential oils, but I'm way more open-minded now than I was when we first spoke off the record back in 2015, I think you and I first spoke. Does that sound about right to you? I think it was late 2015.
Yeah, it was about then, John. Yeah, we had a long chat, didn't we, about all sorts of stuff.
Can you believe it's been half a decade since Flat Earth took over the internet? It feels like yesterday for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Flat Earth at the back end of 2013. I did my first live presentation in 2014. It wasn't until 2015 that I think that it took off. And of course, when Mark Sargent came, I was banging the drum. I was spamming everybody on Facebook about Flat Earth. And I got loads of people unfriended me saying I was completely nuts. And then Mark Sargent came along, so I was having a bit of to and froing with him. And he actually wrote one of his clues based on something I'd told him. But obviously that subsequently turned out to be wrong. So me and him sort of fell out, and he started distancing himself from me.
I'll never forget when I first saw Flat Earth Clues, Part 1, Empty Theatre. Yeah? You've got to give him credit. He knew how to market his wares. All these short clips, typically 7 to 12-minute videos, each one on a set topic, narrated with his beautiful, silky voice, and then just with simple images moving on the screen. Almost hypnotic. What he did, whether you like Flat Earth or not, what he did from a marketing angle was genius.
Oh, yeah, it was. He was, he was on Fakeologist the week after, wasn't he? The guy just rang him up.
You just spoiled my trivia question. I was going to ask you, who do you think was the first person, here's some inside baseball, who was the first ever person to interview Mark Sargent? And it was, of course, Ab the Fakeologist. Small world, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and then, of course, it divided into, I ended up being in the camp that, we were arguing about the models and what have you, the Flat Earth, and I spent months trying to do a map, and I looked at all the maps. Funnily enough, Mark Sargent had a picture of Pac-Man on one of his maps, which sort of gave me a bit of a clue. But I did draw out all the maps, and the one I came up with is the closest to reality. We were never going to see what the shape of this realm is, because you couldn't get high enough. If you could actually see it, you couldn't. But the diamond shape is the closest to reality. For virtually every, if you were calculating the distance, because I made a scale map, I bought a load of expensive technical drawing paper with, doing it all to scale, and everything was within 5% of reality, or what officially we are told the distances are between two cities. Whereas with the circular map, it's some of them are okay, but some of them are so far out that it's a joke.
Well, I promise you, we'll come back and talk about the maps later in the call. We're coming towards the end of the first hour, and I've taken a few notes while you've been speaking, things I want to ask you a question about as a follow-up. So let's get through these little dot points I've got written down, then we'll come back and talk about some of these other topics later in the call. You mentioned that you grew up in Cheshire, in England. Is that where the term Cheshire cat comes from? Yeah.
Grinning like a Cheshire cat, yeah.
And then also Cheshire cat isn't it a Cheshire cat in Alice in Wonderland?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I might be making that up, but I think I could be wrong, but I think the cat who has a chat with Alice, I think is a Cheshire cat. I'm going to check that in between hours 1 and hours 2. So you're in Liverpool right now, you make your money selling these alternative remedies and essential oils. But before that, you grew up in Cheshire, you found out about the moon landings, that led to 9/11, that led to alternative health. And then today, what are the main topics? If you had a YouTube channel that you were posting on regularly, what do you think would be the main topics that you'd be covering? What are the main things that you find interesting these days as of 2020?
It's the nature of reality, John. I'm 100% convinced that you, John LeBon, JLB, have been Joan LeBon many times over, and you're having, it's not a Groundhog Day, it's a Groundhog Life. Hando's watching my video. He thinks it's great. The big
Hando from Estonia. I'm all about the context here, because you never know who's going to listen today or in 10 years' time. You're talking about Hando from Estonia, Super Agent 33.
He's watched it. He's watched it twice. He said he's watching it again. So yeah.
He's seriously the number one conspiracy guy in Estonia. Now, Estonia is a small country, only 1-point-something million people. But quite seriously, no jokes, no hyperbole. He is the number one conspiracy guy in Estonia by far. Can you believe that?
Yeah, sure. I've been to Estonia. It's a beautiful country.
Oh, really? When was that?
It's like a medieval... Well, I was on a cruise ship and we stopped off. It's like a medieval city. Beautiful place. Yeah.
You mean Tallinn in Estonia or a different place?
Tallinn, yeah.
Because I'm thinking of going there. Because, we have another Estonian on this website who joined recently, King Raz, and he was on Sometimes Record 24. Yes. And speaking to this guy, look, I don't want to judge a whole country based on 2 online interactions and then 3 or 4 real-life interactions, but every single one of these people, they've got a certain coolness to them. I wonder if they're all like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out. I'm going to go there and find out for myself. That's if Lawrence were allowed to travel again. Because all this idea of, we're opening up, I'm like, that's what they're saying. That doesn't mean it's actually going to happen, does it?
I think eventually they will. I mean, there is one consensus of thought that what this actually is at the moment is a stress test. And they're going to push us as far as they can, and then it'll be over, but they'll retain some of the new conditions of what we do in our everyday life. For example, the schools, the schools are just not going to work. They'd have to build like four times as many schools to maintain social distancing, and kids aren't going to just stand in a 4-dot square or a circle in the playground on their own. That's just not going to happen. People are going to reject it, and I think you'll find within 5 years that there won't be any schools. It'll all be online. But I think they're going to, they're not going to shut everything down. I don't think they're going to force you to have a vaccine to travel. What they probably will do is take your temperature and stuff like that. And instead of being an hour to get through, the check-in and the check-out, it might be 2 or 3 hours. But if they start introducing mandatory vaccines, there's so many of the sheeple, as you want to call them, the normies, that are anti-vaccine as well. That's just not going to work. So they will bring in more restrictions, I'm sure.
I lovingly refer to them as the lemmings, or if I'm being a bit more serious, the NPCs, the non-player characters, which we will talk about, I promise, in the second hour of this call. Now, to finish off the first hour, I want to get your opinions on JFK, because for me, I think it's so easy to overlook the significance of JFK. It was 50 years ago, who cares? Well, actually, I think there's a lot of insight to be gleaned symbolically from what happened there. So I want to get your opinions on that. But before we do that, we've got to read out the credits. I try and read out the credits on these calls, the people who make all of this possible. So let me ask you, have you got your computer in front of you? Can you go on to johnthebond.com and check out the main page for me?
I'm on the Discord page. Is that where I need to be?
No, johnthebond.com, the main website, the best website on the internet today, bar none, in my humble opinion. Because what I'd love for you to do for me is to help me read out the credits, the people who make all of this possible. Then once we've done that, we'll talk about JFK. Then we'll round out the first hour. And then in the second hour, we're going to come back and talk about the Concorde hoax and the Tokolov, because they're kind of two sides of the same coin, it could be argued. The energy hoax, the oil hoax, the nature of reality, Flat Earth Pac-Man, 5G coronavirus man. The second hour is going to be intense. But we need to read out the credits of this call. So can you see the credits on the right-hand side of johnthebond.com?
I've just got to log in first, John, onto that. Click in here.
See, some people ask me, why do you do the credits on all the calls? I'm like, well, because if it wasn't for these people, there would be no call. There's no way I could do what I do. I mean, I've released, I think, 5 podcasts in the past 12 days. How come I can spend all this time doing this? Because these calls do take more time to edit than you might think. How come I can do this? Well, because this is what I do now. This is my thing. But I can only do that because of all of these people. So they're making it possible. So I listen to Joe Rogan. I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan when he interviews fighters. I don't like his nonsense talking to so-called scientists and all that. That's all ridiculous. He's part of the system. He's a system man. That's his thing. But when he talks to fighters, the interviews are fantastic. They don't just talk about fighting and MMA. They talk about the philosophy, the attitude towards life. Excellent stuff. You know what he does? For the first 10 minutes of his interviews, for the first 10 minutes, literally, he just sits there saying, this call is brought to you by blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's cool. I'm down with that. But that's 10 minutes of someone trying to sell you something. Well, the credits isn't selling you anything. These are literally the people who make this possible. So I like to read them out on every one of these Sometimes Records.
I've got the page up, John. Now, where am I looking?
So scroll down to where it says full members.
Full members, yeah. Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to read these out. I'll read a line and then you read a line. How's that sound?
Okay, sure.
So these are the people making these calls possible at johnthebond.com. The latest are Jimbo, Sid, and Hunty A6.
And then we've got Adam, Adrian C, and Alphax Omega.
Alpha X Omega. And then we've got Al, Anthel, AP, Archer, Baltimore.
BCMU, Bendwater, and Big Dave.
BM Seattle, Brandon Berry.
Bravo, Callum, and Chad 628.
Chris 746, Chris Langton, Cruiser Now.
Curryman 11, Decode Reality, and D Buser.
Dante from New York, Dim Eyes.
DJ Mo 1987 and Doctor My Eyes.
Ben Zig, Fly Fisher, French Bull Dad.
G-Pop, History Buried at JD.
Jimmy Scowler, King Raz from Estonia, Clink39.
Nightly News and Laura Mars.
Local Chump, Lux Invictus, Mark J.
Mars Matthew F. Matt Reynolds.
Maddie V from Phuket, Mero District.
Mezzy, Mum with Sons and Mongo.
M. Rutkowski, Notosphere.
Nedin Tropy, Nocrates and Noise West.
Some of these are difficult to read, I know. It's part of the fun, actually. Off Story, Pango, Permaculture Hill.
Phantom, Philharmonic, Philip BBG.
PJG, Ponsot, Ravi, Rico, Rick K.
Salzburg Gold and Sarah HHA.
You missed Shadow Tiger on that line, and we pronounce it Sarah Ha. And she actually put together this really cool cross stitch, which I didn't even know was a thing, but apparently there's some hobby that some people have where they make patterns and then they stitch them in a pattern. Look, I'm not an arts and crafts guy, but she put together this cross stitch where it says, nobody died, nobody got hurt. I don't know if you saw that. I put it in my latest video, but I thought that was fantastic. This idea that nobody died, nobody got hurt is spreading. It's never going to spread to the masses, but within our little corner of the internet, more people are starting to realise, Lawrence, that nobody died, nobody got hurt.
Yeah, it's common. I mean, I've got a personal, there was a case there where my partner used to work, and one of the members of staff said that somebody had died in the Manchester bombings. Of course, it was all a hoax. And I said to her, no, she's just pulling a fast one to try and get a day off. And we had a big row about it. She wasn't having it. No, people wouldn't do that.
Was this the Manchester bombing with Ariana Grande?
That was it, yeah.
You know, that was the event. I made a video saying that event was real, but it was a satirical video. It was like 2 or 3 minutes long. Got 700,000 views on YouTube. To this day, my most successful ever YouTube video. And what I was saying was, this Ariana Grande event is real. Good times. Sadly, that channel has been deleted, but we'll always have the memories. So where were we? We were at Sarah Ha, Shadow Tiger. Next is Smarty Pants, Steffers, still Fiona.
Stoned, Maverick, Sonny, the Merovingian.
The Portland Thinker, The Prophet 49, Taiki Limited, Todd P.
Topsy Kretz, Truth Grasshopper, Uninspired Thought, and Veloset.
And then What's Up Sport, Who Knows, and Woolworm 2. So we'll come back and do the 2020 members and the super agents in the second hour of the call. Big thanks to everybody making this possible here at johnthebond.com. Now, I did promise, Lawrence, that we'd finish off this part of the call talking about JFK. I've got my opinions on JFK, but let's round out hour one. You tell me your thoughts on JFK.
Yeah, I saw a book off a link on Fakeologists. This guy wrote this book. I forget, Miles Matthews, I think his name was. Lots of links to videos and showing how the whole thing was staged. Even the guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, who was then killed by some other person after he'd been arrested. The whole thing was obviously staged. And then I saw the thing from Dave.
Dave J.
Dave, it was on your channel recently. What was his second name?
Dave Johnson, the great Dave Johnson.
Dave Johnson, yeah. And then he showed where the footage had been spliced, and you can see the guy in one bit, his legs are open, and the other one, the legs are closed, and But yeah, the car travelled twice. First time, and then the second time with a dummy in the back, and that's what happened. It's patently obvious. But I say to lots of people about this, I say, there's hundreds of books and stories about the JFK assassination, but they've all got one thing in common, and they end up with a dead president. And I take the view that JFK continued living afterwards, with a strong possibility that he may have, took on the new guise of Jimmy Carter, because their smile, their teeth are identical. And if they're not one and the same person, they certainly came from the same test tube, from the same family. But,
this is already, Lawrence, can I tell you, this is already one of my favourite episodes of Sometimes Record, because I was hoping you would throw in your person X is person Y. That's what we call it here at johnthebond.com. We call this person is that person. We call it person X is person Y. And I remember you telling me in our call 5 years ago, this was off the record, our call, I remember you telling me that you thought that, in fact, let me see if you remember what you told me. You told me that you thought that Lady Gaga was a reinvented pop starlet who had passed away. Do you remember who you told me you thought was originally Lady Gaga?
Yeah, Amy Winehouse.
Yeah, now is that still your opinion?
I haven't revisited it, John, but let me just tell you briefly about why I think Jimmy Carter, it was who JFK became. If you actually go on and look for photographs of JFK's wedding, you'll see hundreds of them. You go and look for pictures of Jimmy Carter's wedding, and you'll see one photograph. Now, come on, a president of the United States, there should be hundreds of photographs of his wedding, but there's one.
Yeah, so let me tell you that when you first shared with me your Amy Winehouse's Lady Gaga theory back in 2015, again, I just wasn't as open-minded back then. So I was like, okay, fair enough, that's Lawrence's opinion, but it wasn't something that I was willing to really entertain very much, because to me it just sounded crazy. Whereas here we are 5 years later. Do I think Amy Winehouse became Lady Gaga? No, but if I found out that was the case, I wouldn't be shocked, I wouldn't be surprised, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, how did this happen? I'd be like, yeah, fair enough, yep, why not?
Here's one for you, John. Prince didn't die, he's now playing his sister. That is so obvious if you go and look at some of the videos on that.
I didn't even know that Prince had a sister, but maybe we can come back and talk more about PX is PY. But I guess one of my points just from this first hour of the call, Lawrence, is that I spoke to you 5 years ago, and a lot of what you said resonated with me, and we agreed about a lot of things. There were other things where I was like, yeah, I don't think so. I think this guy might have gone too far. But I was happy to talk about these things. I didn't find it off-putting. And I think 5 years later, that's probably why I've been able to do a lot of what I've done, is because I didn't say, oh, well, I disagree about this topic with this person, so now I'm going to make that the central focus of our communication. It's like, all right, we disagree. Let's move on to other topics. Sometimes it just takes time to become more open-minded. And hopefully the listeners of this call, if some of these ideas are new to them, whether it's nobody died, nobody got hurt, JFK is Jimmy Carter, you can cure your own health problems with your own remedies, any of these ideas, if it's too full on to people right now, hopefully they can at least be patient and give themselves time to, whether it takes a year or two or 5, as the case may be, deprogram out of the nonsense that was put in our brains for the past 10, 20, 40, 50 years. So what we'll do, Lawrence, is we'll come back for part 2 of the call. We'll talk about the Concorde hoax, the Tokolov energy hoax, the oil hoax. I believe that the oil does not come from the ground. Quite a story to all of that. The nature of reality, why we're here, why there are these NPCs all around us. Pac-Man, Flat Earth, 5G, coronavirus. The second hour is going to be nuts. Members have access to that right now at johnthebond.com, and if you're not a member, maybe now's the time to join. So Lawrence coming to us from Southport in England. The members will see you in just a moment for hour 2. But for those of you listening to this on a public release, I'm John the Bond coming to you from Kuala Lumpur, and it's May 22. This has been Sometimes Record episode 26, and big thanks once again to all the members who make all of this possible.
Now let's see. Where was I? I wonder which way I ought to go.
And the sliding toes did the guile and him fell in the way. All amusing were the water holes and the warm rats out of the rain.
Now, where in the world do you suppose that...
Lose something?
Oh! Well, I was... No, I was just wondering...
Oh, that's quite all right. One moment, please. Ooh. Second chorus. 'Twas brilliant, and the slithy toes did the gyre and the gimble in the way.
Why, you're a cat.
A Cheshire cat, all a mimsy. Oh, the water goes.
Oh, wait! Don't go, please!
Very well. Third chorus.
Oh, no. Thank you, but I just wanted to ask you which way I ought to go.
Well, that depends on where you want to get to.
Oh, it really doesn't matter. As long as I can...
Then it really doesn't matter which way you go. Oh, by the way, if you'd really like to know, he went that way.
Who did?
The white rabbit.
He did?
He did what?
Went that way.
Who did?
The white rabbit.
What rabbit?
But didn't you just say? I mean, oh, dear.
Can you stand on your head? However, if I were looking for a white rabbit, I'd ask the Mad Hatter.
Mad Hatter? No, I don't...
Or there's the March Hare in that direction.
Thank you. I think I shall visit him.
Of course, he's mad, too.
But I don't want to go among mad people.
Oh, you can't help that. Most everyone's mad here. You may have noticed that I'm not all there myself. And the moras are...
Goodness. If the people here are like that, I must try not to upset them. 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 Must try not to upset them.